Hey guys, this is my review for Come and See. This was a 1985 Russian film directed by Emil Kimyov, and the film follows a young boy named Flora as he goes through an absolutely gut-wrenching yet incredibly short, small period of time during the Russian-German conflict during the Second World War. I watched a video at the beginning of this year on YouTube, I believe something along the lines of the scariest film that you've ever seen that isn't a horror film. I'll put the link if I can find it in the description below. I just got the vibes from this film that this was a very gut-wrenching, very unflinching portrayal of the conflict between the Russians and the Germans. For those of you who don't know, the Germans invaded Russia during Operation Barbarossa, and they essentially had the same mentality with the Russians as they did with the Jews. Instead of putting them in camps, they were just to kill them. They were to wipe out the Russian people. And the Russian people themselves were then put in a situation of live or die. Literally. They had to defend themselves or they would all be wiped out. And this film doesn't hold any punches when it comes to showing just how terrible, how horrible, and the absolute horrors that happened in this part of the conflict of the Second World War. First off, I'd have to say that this is apparently a 2020 restoration of the film. It looks damn good, and the fact that a lot of this film was shot on a Steadicam back in the 80s is pretty impressive. How great the cleanup is, how great the stabilization has been done. The audio is still a little bit off, but apparently that they did touch up the audio for this remaster, so if this is what it sounds like remastered, I can't imagine how really dirty and grindy it must have sounded before this. But let's talk about the film. The film follows this boy named Flora, and he is very, very eager to join the partisan group that is fighting against the Nazis. Even though his mother and his sisters don't really want him to go, his mother is literally begging him not to go. The film does start on the somewhat light note because it has this friend of his, this little boy in this little German outfit, come up to the screen and start kind of insulting you. And that is when you get the first glimpse of what this director is trying to do. We see that he is trying to give you a POV of the war, not like some cheap tricks with a found footage film, but he's literally putting you in the character's shoes. And this happens throughout the film. Whenever we're having conversation, we are always getting a straight on. We're getting a back and forth, never usually over the shoulders. Or coverage is a lot of straight ons, which makes the film's interactions far more intimidating, far more intimate. And as the film progresses down into its trip to absolute hell, these interactions become far, far more deep-reaching, and they become far more unnaturally uncomfortable. When he joins the partisan group in the forest, we kind of see how ill-prepared they were and how it was just kind of a hodgepodge of groups of different people from different villages. And throughout the film, we see that the Russian government really didn't have as much attempt in the effort of helping the people as they could, because Russia is a massive, massive country, but at the same time, they were ill-prepared for what the Germans were bringing. And it was purely through brute force and undying determination that they were able to defeat the Nazis, and they were able to bring what the Nazis brought on them tenfold when they entered into Berlin at the end of the war. And when we're in this forest, we see that this film is shot with, if I'm correct, natural lighting almost entirely. There's very few, if any at all, artificial lighting added to any of these scenes, and I actually really appreciate that. Sure, there are some scenes where it's so dark you almost can't see anything, but it gives that natural feel. And this lighting tactic helps with how we portray the landscape and the areas they're in. The forest, the farmlands, they seem peaceful and quaint at first, but as the film slowly progresses down this trail, everything gets darker. Everything becomes almost horror-filled, because once the film gets going, it ain't going to give you any reprieve. Not at all. Right up until the end. And the first time you feel very uncomfortable is when you meet Glasha. This is this girl who obviously had a relationship with the lead commandant of the Russian group. And there's this interaction where the two of them are just crying in each other's faces. Flora is upset that he got left behind. She's upset that she got left behind. They're both being upset about the same thing, but for completely different reasons. And this is when it starts to get uncomfortable, because we have such intimacy. We see such emotion from these actors. And you can't look away from this because they're looking at you the whole time. They are making eye contact with you. That intimacy is uncomfortable, but it's key to really giving the message of this film across. And then after this scene, fucking bombs drop. They blow up a forest on camera to a point where one of the trees almost falls on the camera operator. But the guy must have had a good shot of vodka before this, because he's slowly able to pan and show the devastation of this forest without missing a beat at all. There's no way this movie could be made now, considering the amount of safety protocols they clearly violated. They used actual explosives to blow up a forest, probably killed a cow. They used live gunfire over top of the actors' heads. At one point later on in the film, there's a guy who has a flamethrower who goes to do... Actually, I probably should put this down. He goes to take a shot with a flamethrower and it does this. Because that's most likely an actual flamethrower they were using. But after the bombing scene, the SS troopers drop, and this is where it becomes a very personal journey for Flora and his trail down into madness. The director said that apparently he was afraid that after this film was done, that the young actor was going to have to commit himself to a psych ward. And you can see this. Not only do you see it from his performance, but you see it literally on his face. The film was shot entirely in chronological order, and he goes from looking like a sweet little 14-year-old kid to looking like a 64-year-old hardened, soulless veteran. His descent into chaos and madness in this film is hard to watch. It's gut-wrenching, but it is so enthralling. And there's these little moments that just fill you with dread for kind of the most peculiar reasons. We see him going into this village and we see that no one's there, but he thinks he knows where they are, so they start running towards this little island in the middle of a bog, and Glasha just takes a small glance back and sees this horrible sight. But it's only for a second, but everyone in the theater just went because it hits you that hard. It just hits you that sudden. And then we see him go through the bog, and the bog is by far one of the best parts of the film, because you can see the actors are going through an absolute hell trying to get through this bog while trying to portray their fleeting hope, their fleeting madness. And the music is an interesting choice in this film. You constantly hear the hum of the German patrol plane in the film, and it mixes with the ambience. And we also have this weird distortion of Mozart music at times, one of it being in the bog, and it really helps put you into this unnatural feeling. And that kind of brings me to the camera work of this film. This film was shot heavily on Steadicam, and if not, there's a lot of long shots of either one-on-one interactions, or there's just panning shots. This bog shot is all one shot of just watching them go through just absolute hell to try and get through this bog. And it's that unflinching look that pulls you into this film and the tribulation of these characters. And as things start to get worse, and where they go to this village where the Nazis also just round up everyone and put them in a community hall, and the camera work admittedly is a little odd here and there. It almost seems like a home movie from time to time when they're doing these pullouts and it slowly kind of judders. It's like how you would normally use a zoom lens. It's not a full, complete smooth transition. There's a little bit of jankiness, and it happens from time to time, but it really helps place you in this time. It doesn't detract anything. It doesn't make it feel like it's a badly put together film. It just helps embed you in this immersion. The only thing that does take you out a little bit is the audio. As I mentioned earlier, it's a bit rough, and that's because there are certain scenes, there's certain points in the film where characters barely look like they're talking, or if they're talking at all, but then all of a sudden audio will come in. There's a scene later on with Flora, which he's just gone through absolute hell at this point, and his lips are barely moving. You hear this toad-like voice, and it takes you a second to realize that it's him. It's actually this kid, because he's just seen so much shit at this point. It's unnerving, it's unflinching, it doesn't give you any reprieve. And even the end of the film, this was pretty much just a week, maybe. And it's gonna get just worse from here. And there's a lot of really cool natural moments in this film. There's a scene where they're trying to get across this field and it's full of fog. And I don't know whether they just got lucky and had the thickest fog cloud roll through, or it was the best Atmos team of all time. But this sequence is great because it helps embed you in this horror, this natural horror, the horrors of war and humans doing evil to one another. And I can keep saying it's great, but at the same time, it's just shitty too, because It really bums you out, but in a good way. It's a very, very committed film to its subject matter. Some might not be able to watch this. I can completely understand. There's this scene where poor little Flora has a gun to the side of his head. I felt like the kid was actually thinking he was gonna die, not just pretending that he was going to die in this scene. I think maybe he possibly was a little worried that they still had live ammunition in this gun. It's not a war film in the sense of battles and conflict. It's a war film in terms of atrocities and the evil of humans and the durability of your survival. How much can you endure? And what is the cost? What is the sacrifice? What is worth it to you to survive and to exact revenge? The film ends with this really cool montage about the idea of how far back, how much can you degrade yourself to a monster to defeat monsters. Come and See, ironically enough, is definitely a movie you should see, especially if you are interested in history, interested in the Second World War, interested in the conflict in Russia. It's not a fun time, just gonna tell you that right now. It's beautifully shot in certain points. There's some fantastic story moments. It's not good. It's kind of like a Schindler's List, if anything. It's that depressing. But I definitely see that Come and See, thankfully through this restoration, is a movie that hopefully will be seen by more. It'll be shown to more, just to show this absolute horrible shit that humans have done to one another. And what we are capable of if we ever go down that road again. So in the end, I'm gonna give Come and See a 7 out of 7. I don't know if I could ever watch this again. I don't know if I could, but I'm happy that I did. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, leave a like, and if you're interested in more, subscribe. Otherwise, see you guys next time.
Thanks for watching the video. My name is Nitz, and you might remember me from the animated cult classic TV show Undergrads. It's been a while, but I'm happy to say the Clique is finally getting back together in an all-new movie, thanks to a successful Kickstarter campaign. But we are still asking for your support. To see any and all updates about the upcoming Undergrads movie, be sure to check out and like the Bring Back Undergrads Facebook page. And with any luck, we'll see you guys soon.